My tap dance. So that we find.
We do not have a, well, with the exit.
Yeah.
And I forgot about.
Members. 4, 5, 6, 7. The case.
I to start thinking about my recital is in
Yes.
Here we go. Oh, there we go. We said we're north. We got it.
Right. Well, welcome back, everyone.
Used to go visit my family.
I was gonna do a unity clap, but teacher call, right? Welcome back, everyone. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Hopefully you were able to get some lunch. I can see that Commissioner Simmons is a much lighter mood now.
Man's been fed.
We're gonna go ahead and get started with our next item, 4B. For our next item, 4B, the Child Development Permit Work Group Field Survey Update. This item is being presented by Renee Marshall, Deborah Keeler, and Bronwyn Kennedy. It's an information action item. Marshall, will you please begin?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. The ECE team is proud to share item 4B, Child Development Permit Work Group Field Survey Update. This is an information and action item that will share the results of the Child Development Permit Field Survey, a qualitative and quantitative measure that was available in both English and Spanish. More than 2,000 colleagues from the field of early childhood education engaged in the survey. Before we begin our presentation, I would like to draw your attention to Table 2, which is on page 14 of the agenda item, which is a summary table of work group recommendations and modifications. Please refer to this table throughout the agenda item. The ECE team wishes to give special thanks to the support of the colleagues at Regional Center 15 at West Ed, led by Liz Jameson and supported by Krista Murphy. Their partnership has been absolutely essential to the child development permit work. The ECE team would also like to give special thanks to COPTE, specifically Eduardo Munoz and Clara Amador Lankster for providing translation support. The Child Development Permit is a lattice for stability and a ladder for advancement. This agenda item presents the results of the Commission Field Survey conducted between October and December 24 on the recommendations of the Commission's CDP work group. Next steps are presented for Commission discussion and possible action. Staff recommends that the Commission review the information presented in this agenda item and, if appropriate, approve proposed changes to the Child Development Permit and next steps. This agenda item presents the results of the field survey conducted on the recommendations of the Commission's Child Development Permit Work Group. This item is divided into 5 sections. Section 1 provides an introduction. 2 is an overview of the survey and the responses. 3 includes the field survey results, analysis, and recommended action. Section 4 includes opportunities for further development. And we will end with section 5, which talks about transition and next steps. I also want to call your attention to the 8 appendices we have in this item that are all about the child development permit and the work that's happened up to this point. So please refer to Appendix A through H during this presentation. Next, I would like to introduce Bronwyn Kennedy, who will share the next part of our agenda.
Thank you. Good afternoon. In August 2023, a child development permit work group was formed to review and recommend updated requirements for the CDP, authorizing service to children from birth to age 8 with state-subsidized childcare and development programs. Completed in July 2024, this effort reflects 9 years of collaboration to enhance quality and ensure competency-based preparation for the early childhood workforce. Aligned with the 2020 Master Plan for Early Learning and Care, Universal Transitional Kindergarten, and the new PK3 Early Childhood Specialist Instruction Credential, the proposed updates support a comprehensive, cohesive approach to early child workforce preparation. The proposed permit matrix outlines a clear lattice for stability and ladder for advancement for early childhood educators, aligned with NAEYC standards and competencies, support progressions, support a PK3 ECE specialist instruction credential. If adopted by the commission, it will establish 3 educator levels and 2 administrator levels, each with defined scopes of practice and preparation requirements. This structure promotes clear pathways for effective practice, licensure, professional development, and career advancement. It is important to note that updates to the child development permit, including titles, authorizations, and preparation requirements, will only impact future applicants for a permit once these requirements have been adopted into Title V regulations. Holders of the current or any former level of the child development permit are entitled to hold and renew their existing permit for the duration of their work in the profession. At the October 2024 commission meeting, staff presented the CDP Workgroup's recommendation and were directed to conduct a field survey for feedback. Released on October 25th and open until November 22nd, 2024, it was widely distributed across the early education field, reaching licensed childcare facilities, Head Start programs, early learning associations and networks, the Child Department of Education, and 2-year and 4-year higher education institutions, and the commission's listservs. Available in both English and Spanish, it included 63 questions. Full results are in Appendix H. Field survey respondents were asked to evaluate proposed elements of each level of the permit using a 3-point Likert scale. Respondents could provide specific feedback on the proposed permit matrix, share general comments, and optionally submit demographic information. On the top of page 4 is a table provides the number of survey submissions, survey respondents by their survey language accessed. Individuals who submitted more than one survey had their most recent responses included the results. Appendix A has more detail. The total number of submissions was 2,059. The total number of respondents was 2,036. I will now turn it over to Dr. Keeler to talk about the data dashboard and survey results.
Thanks so much, commission members. So an internal data dashboard was developed, offering key insights into each of the levels and elements of the work group recommendations to appropriately examine the data from the field survey. Big thank you to VP Health for your dedication and assistance with data preparation and the dashboard. We will begin with the demographic data. Look at the first element, the county of employment. Excuse me. It was, this went out, so sorry about that. I have to.
We were excited to show you the data dashboard, so this is just to add to these. Right?
I tested it. Okay, I got it. Sorry about that, guys. So in the first element, when we go to the survey respondents information, we have the county of employment. Most respondents came from the South Coast at 31% and Bay Area at 24%, making up more than half of the total survey respondents. If we looked at the years worked in the early childhood field, most respondents had extensive ECE experience, with 32.9% having 20 plus years and 16% with 20 to 25 years, reflecting a highly experienced workforce. When we look at the type of program, the top 3 program types represented were state-funded preschool at 27%, Head Start at 18%, licensed family childcare at 18%. Primary current role of the respondents, directors at 23%, made up the largest group, followed by teachers at 18% and other administrators at 10%. Those with a child development permit currently held, The most held permits were program directors at 33%, site supervisors at 27%, and teachers at 25%. Those currently holding child development associate credential, 86% did not hold a CDA, and the remainder did hold a CDA, national CDA credential. And the types of California credentials held, 86% did hold a California teaching credential or administrative credential. And of those that did hold a credential, the remainder, the highest level was at the multiple subject credential level, at 8.6%. And in terms of the degrees held, the highest educational level were a bachelor's degree in early childhood at 23%, an associate's at 22%, and a bachelor's in another field at 21%. When we looked at the age group allocation, the largest age group representations were 46 through 55 years old at 33% and 55 plus years at 28%. Gender representation, respondents identified as mostly as women at 94%, and race and ethnicity. The largest groups were Hispanic or Latino at 35% and white at 33%. Primary language, the majority spoke English at 74%, followed by Spanish at 15%. And so when we look at the other aspects, such as the quantitative data, we have all of the levels that we analyzed here at the top for each of the levels. And the quantitative breakdown of survey respondents showed a breakdown of each level and element in relationship, the orange representing disagree, the gray representing neutral, and the blue representing agree. And the qualitative data, as we look below here, for both the disagree questions and the general comment questions, were actually categorized into particular themes. These open-ended responses provided context to the areas of disagreement or general comments to allowing for understanding of concerns or recommendations from those respondents that participated in the survey. They were coded based on those themes and elements, and these data analytics really helped us to categorize what the concerns were or the general comments with that. So that is a snapshot of our data dashboard. And so now we're going to dive more specifically into the data itself. The recommendations outlined below indicate the status of each level and element is either approved without modification or approved with modification. In table 2, as Renee referred to on page 14, elements marked as approved are recommended to proceed without modification, as they received an approval rate of 70% or higher from the survey respondents. For elements designated as approved with or without modification with an asterisk, received less than 70% approval. Careful consideration was given to each of the elements. In some cases, adjustments were made based on survey feedback noted as bracketed inserts that included areas of disagreement and comments from workgroup discussions, CDP workgroup recommendations, and staff considerations. The combined percentages of agree and neutral responses are provided for reference, though these are not assumed to represent full agreement. For the purposes of this presentation, we will not be covering recommendations to approve without modification if the 70% threshold has been met. We will, however, cover the recommendations to approve with or without modification that are below the 70% threshold. So the ECE1 permit, which is the supportive role, includes 4 elements below the 70% threshold, which indicate a recommendation to approve with or without modification. Clinical field experience requirements, recommendation to approve with modification, modified to require classroom experience comparable to the associate teacher level on the current CDP matrix. This would include 50 days of experience in an instructional type of program, at least 3 hours per day within the last 2 years. The rationale for this modification, survey respondents highlighted the need for clinical field experience. However, some practicum courses require up to 5 3-unit prerequisite courses before candidates can enroll. Revising the requirement to focus on equivalent classroom experience rather than additional coursework ensures a more equitable pathway for candidates while maintaining the necessary practical expertise for the position. For ECU1 provisional certification, recommendation to approve with modification. Modified to include classroom experience as a part of the provisional certification for candidates who are still working towards their 12 ECE units. EC1 provisional certification is valid for 2 years with no renewal option. The rationale is that survey respondents emphasize the importance of clinical field experience in maintaining high educational standards in early childhood. This modification would allow provisional certification to those who are obtaining their classroom experience as noted under clinical field experience. Alternative qualifications, recommendation to approve without modification, keeping the existing child development associate credential as a part of the alternate requirements. The CDA is a nationally recognized credential and is included in the current CDP at the associate teacher level, highlighting its significance as a foundational credential within the ECE profession. Rationale is some survey respondents share critique of the CDA credential for a lack of hands-on training and recommending educational attainment, practical experience. The CDA remains an approved standard across all 50 states and has the CDP Workgroup's endorsement. Type of permit, recommendation to approve without modification. Keep the term requirements at 5 years and 2 years for the EC1 provisional certification with no renewal option as recommended by the CDP Workgroup. The rationale is survey respondents strongly support policies allowing unlimited renewals for EC permits. All permit levels are eligible for renewal under the updated CDP matrix with no term limits on non-provisional permits. This decision helps to ensure that CDP matrix serves as both a lattice for stability and ladder for advancement within the field of early childhood. The ECE2 permit, which is the teacher level, includes 4 elements that were below the 70% threshold, which indicate a recommendation to approve with or without modification. For the educational requirements, the recommendation to approve with modification is to modify the language to state associate degree or higher to explicitly include candidates who currently hold an associate's degree or higher in ECE as noted by the survey respondents. So for those that are interested in a teaching role with a higher degree included. Alternative qualifications approved with modification. Modified permit level to state associate degree or higher where applicable. Consider alternative pathways to enhance flexibility as a future agenda item. Survey respondents highlighted the need for flexible and inclusive ECE certification pathways to accommodate diverse educational backgrounds and professional experiences. Suggestions included recognizing Montessori certification, paid internships, and extensive field experience. The term of the permit, recommendation to approve without modification, keeping the term requirements at 5 years. Some of the survey respondents strongly advocated for unlimited renewals, extending validity periods of 5 to 10 years, and reducing professional development requirements. But the CDP workgroup felt strongly about a standardized 5-year duration, professional development requirements that ensures continuity across matrix levels, while aligning with funding initiatives such as professional development and quality counts California programs. So the ECE permit includes 4 elements below the 70% threshold, indicating recommendation to approve with or without modification. Education requirements, recommendation to approve with modification, modify language to state bachelor's degree or higher, explicitly include candidates who currently hold a bachelor's degree or higher in early childhood. The respondents' concern about a bachelor's degree requirement included high costs, low wages, and workforce shortages. We recognize those are valid concerns. However, staff believes the recommendation of a bachelor's or higher aligns with a master teacher level on the current CDP matrix, reflecting the more complex responsibilities associated with mentoring others, adults, curriculum coordination, and staff development in current child development settings. Further, a bachelor's degree or higher as a requirement for ECE supports career advancement towards earning a PK3 ECE specialist instruction credential. Provisional certification, recommendation to approve without modification. Approve with no provisional certification. The rationale was time-limited permits were suggested of a 1 to 2 year for the ECE 3 level by respondents with relevant experience or in-progress education, with recommendations to recognize professional experience and require professional development or supervised field work. However, the work group endorsed provisional certification only at the ECE 1 and 2 levels, because ECE is a pathway to ECE administration and the PK3 ECE specialist instruction credential, and provides a unique role, including coordinator, curriculum, staff development, mentorship at the site or program level. Alternative qualifications, recommendation to approve with modification. Modify language to state bachelor's degree or higher to explicitly include candidates who currently hold a bachelor's or higher in ECE. In addition, add language that supports a multiple subject credential, having supervised clinical field experience in an early childhood setting. The rationale is survey respondents emphasize the need to strengthen educational experiential requirements by requiring multiple subject credential holders to have supervised clinical field experience in an ECE setting. The ECA, or the Early Childhood Administrator Level 1 permit, includes 4 elements below the 70% threshold, which indicate recommendation to approve with or without modification. Education requirements, recommendation to approve with modification. Modify language to state associate degree or higher to explicitly include candidates who currently hold an associate's degree or higher in early childhood. Rationale, while respondents recommend higher qualifications for ECA 1, including a bachelor's degree in ECE, the current requirement of an associate's degree aligns with the ECA 1's role as an entry-level pathway into the administrative field with supervision of an early learning and child within the early learning and child development program at a single site. Staff believes this approach balances accessibility with the need to promote equity, ensuring effective leadership without exacerbating workforce shortages. Provisional certification, recommendation to approve without modification. Approve with no provisional certification. Survey respondents supported provisional certification to address workforce shortages and support transitions into leadership roles, allowing candidates to work while completing their qualifications. The work group, however, determined that an associate's degree is sufficient to meet workforce needs at a single site level for ECA 1, while ECA 2 serves as a latter opportunity for overseeing multiple programs. The work group also endorsed provisional certification only at the ECE 1 and 2 levels, maintaining a focus on accessible entry-level pathways while ensuring quality and professional standards. Alternative qualifications, recommendation to approve with modification. Update permit levels to require an associate's degree or higher where applicable. Survey respondents emphasize the need for flexible ECA 1 qualifications, supporting options such as an associate degree or higher with 24 units in ECE and ECE field experience. This approach aims to ensure accessibility for those with degrees outside of ECE while maintaining high standards and multiple administrative pathways to meet workforce needs. ECA 2 includes 4 elements below the 70% threshold, which indicate a recommendation to approve with or without modification. The ECA administrative role, education requirements, the recommendation is to approve with modification. Modify language to state bachelor's degree or higher to explicitly include candidates who currently hold a bachelor's degree or higher in ECE. The rationale is survey respondents recommended those with a master's degree or higher be eligible for the ECA role, provided they meet administrative unit and supervised clinical experience requirements. Provisional certification recommendation to approve without modification, approve with no provisional certification. Rationale survey respondents strongly supported a provisional permit, again for the ECA 2, to address workforce challenges. While these findings underscore the importance of flexibility and inclusivity, the work group limited provisional certification to ECE 1 and 2 levels, emphasizing that ECA 2 positions are advanced leadership roles with multiple site responsibilities. Alternative qualifications. Modify permit levels to specify a bachelor's degree or higher where applicable, add terminology to include supervised clinical field experience in an ECE setting for the multiple subject and administrative services credential. Surveys respondents really strongly supported clear and rigorous alternative qualifications for ECA permits, bachelor's degree or higher with 24 units in ECE and administrative coursework. Supervised field experience in ECE was emphasized as essential for leadership preparation, which calls for transparency and standardized criteria to ensure quality and consistency, meeting quality standards for the ECE field. In summary, Table 2 on page 14 outlines the recommendations for all levels with each element receiving approval status as indicated above. Those elements marked with an asterisk have been approved with revisions to address specific feedback from respondents and CDP workgroup recommendations, ensuring they align with the needs of the field and support a robust framework for early childhood. I'm going to hand it back to Renee Marshall.
Thank you, Debbie. Section 4, opportunities for further development. To support the continued development and advancement of the ECE workforce, the following key areas have been identified for future commission agenda items. Number 1, specializations. Support the addition of specializations as recommended by the CDP workgroup to enhance professional development and expertise within the ECE field. A future agenda item would be presented on this. 2, pathways for entry and prior experience. Expand opportunities to acknowledge and validate prior experience and learning by institutions of higher education or other recognized entities. Commission staff propose outlining additional pathways to enter and support progression of the child development permit matrix and the ECE profession. This may include apprenticeships, dual enrollment programs, micro-credentialing systems, integration of models such as Montessori. A full exploration and analysis of pathways would be developed as a part of a future agenda item. 3rd, teaching performance expectations revision. Commission staff will revise the ECE teaching performance expectations and present the revised TPEs to the commission. These updates will maintain the current TPE organizational structure by domain while aligning the levels to correspond with the updated matrix. Additionally, the language will be updated to reflect advancements and changes in the early childhood education field since 2019. Now to wrap it up with our transitions and next steps, I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Keelan.
Thank you. The Commission on Teacher Credentialing exercises broad authority under the California Education Code to oversee educator preparation, credentialing, and professional conduct. As outlined in the Education Code sections 44225A and B, the Commission establishes rigorous standards for educator preparation programs, licenses, educators, and determines eligibility for credentials. It enforces professional ethics through section 4421, accredits preparation programs under section 44372, and adopts regulations to implement legislative changes for section 44225D. Additionally, section 44258.9 empowers the commission to address workforce needs by analyzing teacher supply and demand, ensuring California's education system is supported by qualified professionals. Per statute, individuals holding a CDP under the current permit structure will not be required to transition to any revised CDP matrix that may be subsequently adopted by the commission. Current permit holders will retain the ability to renew their permits under the existing requirements for the duration of their careers, ensuring continuity and recognition of their qualifications. However, once the revised CDP matrix is approved and established in regulations, all individuals entering the field seeking to add a new permit or moving to a different permit level after the adoption of the updated matrix will be required to meet the requirements in place at that time. This approach respects and preserves the credentials of current permit holders while facilitating a transition to a more comprehensive and updated framework for future educators. It balances stability for existing professionals with a forward-looking structure designed to meet the evolving needs of the early childhood education workforce. Staff recommends that the commission review the information presented in this agenda item, and if appropriate, approve proposed changes to the child development permit and next steps. Staff will take the appropriate next steps related to the CDP workgroup recommendations and CDP survey results based on the recommendations moved forward by the commission. We look forward to hearing comments and addressing any.
Thank you. We will now open up for public comment. If there are members of the public that would like to make a comment, please notify the meeting moderator by submitting a request card or by clicking on the raise hand icon if participating through Zoom, pressing *9 if participating by phone. Public comment is limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
Ava Mark.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maya Mark. I'm the VP of Advocacy and Policy with Credential, and we operate about 50 plus childcare and preschool centers, and we serve over 4,000 children in the Bay Area. We also currently have about 600 educators as part of our staff. However, we are experiencing a teacher shortage, and we do have dark classrooms, which leaves a lot of children on our waiting list. And so we appreciate the modifications made based on the field survey. And though we really value higher education to ensure that California's children and families are receiving high quality experiences, my concern is timing. So I am hoping that with the implementation of the new permit matrix, that it would follow in parallel with the field's effort to increase wages for early childhood educators and providers. I am very appreciative of Renee, Deb, and Bronwyn with all of the work that we've done with the field. It's been a really exciting couple of years. And what they have presented, I do have a few questions for clarification. So in regards to the provisional permits for ECE1, one of the questions that I have is that, can this role supervise children? The reason we are experiencing dark classrooms is because we don't have enough educators who are authorized to be with children alone. So we are not able to be in ratio. And so we really want some clarifications on that. And then also the clarification on permit renewals and term limitations. And I'm curious about the timeline and implementation of this entire process. We look forward to the further development and specializations like multilingual learners, infant, toddler, expanding learning, and in regards to special education or inclusions, I am asking that we stop segregating our kiddos. Everyone should take a course in early intervention and differentiated instruction and care, as well as trauma-informed and healing-seeking. We would be honored to be a thought partner with the CTC in the field to fully envision the goals in the master plan for early learning and care and achieve a California for all kids by establishing an equitable pathway for entry into the field of education. Thank you.
Jessica Sacco.
Good afternoon, Jessica Sacco on behalf of Children Now. Thank you for the hour lunch break. I so appreciate that you guys take an hour for lunch. It's really helpful. I also appreciate all the work that has gone into this item. I know it has been a many years long process, even back to the first committee interrupted. Anyway, I really appreciate especially the provisional options for ECE 1 and 2. Children Now really feels like these are important as it leads for pathways for an apprenticeship program, other earn and learn pathways. It's important for us to be able to offer multiple points of entry into these permits. Relative to the specialization, we are in strong support of all three and really want to urge the prioritization of development of those specializations. We think adding those really helps to build the capacity of the workforce. And similar to the comments from the prior speaker, we are also curious about a transition plan as we think about the capacity of our community college system to align itself with these new requirements, particularly around clinical practice, where that fits currently within the community college arc of education that they offer. Is there enough capacity to actually fill all of those slots? I understand there's like waiting lists and other things like that for some clinical practice experience. Are there enough mentor educators to support those clinical practice experience, things like that? So just really wanted you to think about system capacity, not stop doing it, but just really think about as we implement, how do we support the system to embrace and implement these changes? And I think, yeah, that's it. Those are all my comments. Thank you.
Stephen Profiter.
My name is Stephen Proctor, and I'm the Director of the Early Education California Department of Education. We oversee the state's administration of the California State Preschool Program, as well as our grant Office of Head Start Child Care Partnership. So our programs are required to have a permit, all the permit pursuant to the. I'm here in endorsement of the work that the CTC staff here have done to engage California's ECE professionals and business owners through some administration analysis and importantly modification of the matrix recommendations to reflect their feedback. We support the recommendations that the ECE professionals have shared out loud, that they like the direction where the child development is going, with some modifications and considerations for. We further appreciate how the revised permit matrix aligns with the master plan for early learning here, which provided recommendations to ensure that educators have the skills to support children's learning and development, as well as offering multiple pathways to joining the ECE profession. We look forward at the department to continue conversation and collaboration. Pathways and review specializations in the new plan, ensuring a smooth roll for our educators. Again, we are here in support of the recommendations and look forward to continuing.
Heather Hopper, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hello, I'm Heather Hobrick with the Stanislaus County Office of Education. First, I want to thank the CTC staff and the permit work group for their work on this item. It has been a very big undertaking. We do, of course, support the proposal to recognize the experience and keep the CDA for the ECE level 1. However, we do have concerns with the inaccessibility of the clinical practicum and the capacity of our community college system to go ahead and meet those needs that are being stated for ECE2. Further, coursework in our area is only offered in English, and we have concerns about the diversity and equity of our teaching staff that will be able to be in our classrooms moving forward. There are further concerns with the lack of funding that's out there right now to increase these educational requirements, especially in light of the uncertainty of federal funds. Depending on what happens in the federal funds, this could have devastating impacts across the board. I do want to support and say thank you for those additional alternative pathways. Again, as Mr. Profiter just said, they fit really well with the master plan. And so that is one, thing that we really want to say, yes, that's awesome. And then I wanted to just note one piece of confusion that I heard amongst staff that were completing the survey. The confusion lied in that they didn't have a clear understanding in the survey of what was the before and the after. And so we were just having a conversation about that. And I think that that's one area that in future surveys might want to be looked at. Again, thank you for your time. Have a great day.
Valerie De Niro, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Valerie De Niro, and I'm the Director of Policy and Education with Every Child California. I'm also a proud permit group work member, and I respect and appreciate the time, attention, and due diligence in making the recommendations you're hearing today. It was an absolute honor to work among such incredible educators. On behalf of state subsidized programs that are required to employ staff who have a valid child development permit, we have a concern with the term of authorization for ECE1. The recommendation states that it's valid for 5 years and listed as non-renewable. As a work group member, I do not recall conversation regarding a limitation on renewal. We recognize the impact this had on the field with the associate permit limitations that we currently just went through. I urge you to reconsider the recommendations and allow this permit to be renewed without limitation. AB 1930 was approved in January to address the critical need to allow the current associate permit level to be renewed without limiting the number of times it can be renewed. The recommendation for ECE1 will cause the same discourse the associate permit limitation caused. AB 1930 will allow hundreds of early educators to resume their positions and will address some of the workforce shortages our state subsidized programs are currently experiencing. In addition to the limitation to renew the ECE1, it neglects to recognize that early educators should have the right and be allowed to maintain their certification based on their desired role within the classroom. The limitation to ECE1 will cause many to leave the field. Lastly, in addition to barriers of cost and access to higher education, our workforce lacks appropriate compensation. Without pay parity, rate reform, state subsidized programs will lose more teachers and increase the number of dark classrooms due to not having a qualified workforce. I urge you to reconsider the limitation on non-renewable to the ECE1. Thank you so much for
Eduardo Gutierrez.
Before we move to the next question, we'll let staff clarify that.
Just for clarity.
Up to you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead and have it.
Hello? Can folks hear me?
Just one moment, please.
Okay.
Yeah, the response to the last comment is that EC1 is renewable every 5 years. It is the provisional for, if they're coming in with 6 units, it's renewable for one time, but once they complete their 12, it's renewable on an ongoing basis.
So if somebody wants an ECE1, they can have that permit for the duration of their career if they would like to. They will at no time be forced to move. It's the provisional certificate that's meant to be a bridge while somebody's completing those qualifications. We just wanted to make sure that we were clear with that. Because the work group was loud and clear that they would have to continue.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Gutierrez, please, go ahead with your comment.
Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Eduardo Gutierrez, representing Early Edge California. And on behalf of Early Edge, I'd like to thank the commission for the work that they do and providing these recommendations. And I want to take some time to uplift and support a couple of specializations. I know that that is under, or that will be a future agenda item, but supporting the multilingual learner specialization with the high number of DLLs in California. It is important for early educators to be equipped to support bilingual and multilingual children, and also uplifting that renaming the specialization to bilingual specialization emphasizes its focus on developing bilingual competencies for teaching in bilingual settings. And this specialization also aligns very strongly with the California's policies such as Global California 2030, and the new resources such as the preschool TK learning foundations, which emphasize the importance of supporting children's home language alongside English development in the early years, in addition to infant and toddler specialization and the alternative qualifications as well. Thank you for your hard work in making these revisions to the child development permit, and we really appreciate the work. Thank you.
Sandra Mo, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hello, my name is Dr. Sandra Mo, and I am a retired professor of child development and education at Rio Hondo College. I began my career 40 years ago in early childhood as a family child care owner, and I moved on to be a teacher and director at both university and community college level child development center lab schools. And so I want to focus my comments. Oh, before I do that, I wanted to recognize Kate Williams-Brown's calling out Tri-C ECE's Spring Institutes at her college, Skyline College. But I also wanted to make sure you know that there is also the Spring Institute will be in the southern part of the state at LA Southwest College at the end of this month. I am the membership person at Tri-C ECE, and I also serve as Peach's co-lead for the Child Development Permit Work Group. So my concerns really focus on the director and administration part of the new Child Development Permit. Currently, in the permit that we have, there has been a lot of concern about the alternative qualifications for administrators. And I was hoping that this new version would resolve that. Currently, administrators' alternative qualifications can really avoid any ECE training or specializations. One of the concerns I have about the new criteria is that the ECE 3 requires a bachelor's degree, but the ECE Administrator 1 only requires an associate degree. And so that could lead, being a former administrator in lab schools, I could see that that might cause issues. And so that's one of the concerns. And then as far as the demographics of the comments, I noticed that there's a huge percentage, 60% of those that hold permits that are making comments in this survey are directors or site supervisors. And so that might skew the outcome of the survey. So I just wanted to point that out. And thanks so much for all of the information provided in the demographics. That's very useful. Thanks for the commission's work on that.
Please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Lisa Chime. I'm a child development specialist, a parent of 2 young children, and an early educator. I want to really draw attention to the ECA 1 and ECE 2 alternative qualifications. One of the things that stands out to me is we're still creating a pathway for multi-subject and administrative service credential holders to qualify for the ECA 1 and ECA 2, which my previous colleague just mentioned can circumvent the field experience that's necessary. And the other thing it does is it blocks early educators who have climbed up this ladder to get into positions of leadership, because it allows people who have not had to climb that ladder and have that experience to move into these higher paying positions. And so I just want the commission to really think about what the intention is here, and if it's to create a pathway where people can elevate and move through and climb the ladder, then we need to protect those spaces for those who have come up with that experience as a primary. And these alternative qualifications make a value statement about the preparedness of a multi-subject holder and an administrative service credential holder to be equal to that of an early educator. However, there's no pathway for early educators to leave and then go take their experience and qualifications and get a multi-subject credential or an administrative credential. So they cannot be equal in the way that it's structured now, and therefore I feel they should not qualify for an ECA 1 and ECA 2 with just those credentials. Thank you.
No other requests for public.
Public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item?
I should be last. Oh, you waiting for me to say something? So, because, I've got notes. First of all, this is a model of participatory governance at its best. And I really appreciate not only what the 3 of you have done as a group, but all of the people that you invited in for their comments, their experience, informed or not. That's great. And it's hard to do something complex. It's hard to do it. It's hard, and it won't be perfect, but it's such an improvement. And it's so clear that lots of people have been able to weigh in. We won't please all of the people all of the time. I have a few questions myself, but I just wanted to start with that. I think that trying to make this work step by step is a real challenge. I also just want to say for some of the people with questions about the community college system, the community college is the most affordable at $46 a unit. So if you need 6 more units, that's like $250 or $60, which over 2 years might be affordable, and certainly isn't anything like the other levels of higher education that have those more advanced degrees. The second thing is that lots of the community college systems have their clinical practice does in fact require previous college work in order for that clinical practice to be successful. So for instance, if you have a course in child development before you do student teaching, you're more informed about how children develop before you go in and work with them. Same for observation and assessment, curriculum, family community, etc. I think that the questions that I have are trying to ask, like, I'll just have a couple of them. First of all, having provisional certification and alternative qualifications is really great. It really does open up the doors to more than one way to get in. The second thing is that you are getting some questions about the rationale for not having provisional at every level, which I think needs to be, addressed and thought about. I think some of the critiques that I read, I could really then come to understand when you explained it today. And I'm sure that there are people that are listening that are in that same position. I think one of the big things that I noticed is, yes, there is a gap between ECE 3, an overlap, ECE 3 and Early Childhood Administrator 1. What I would like to offer as as something to consider is every single child care program will not have every single level of teacher or administrator. So number 2, as a very collaborative team approach, one of the only approaches in education that is absolutely connected to teams, there may not be this issue of, oh, you have a higher or different degree than I have, in the way that it might be in other ways. The third thing is, it's really important that this next iteration does dovetail into other degrees and credentials. We wanted it to do that. So it will need to do that. So there's going to be some push and pull about, oh, we don't have enough people to even hire now with even 6 units, but oh, you're making it to be 12. But if we don't level that up, we can't make it a ladder or a career ladder. So all of that being said, the one thing that I see is I don't see an articulation of mentorship at the Administrator 1, whereas it is in Early Childhood Educator 3. But then when it says provide mentorship, I would have the question on Educator 3 for whom? Because from my point of view, there's a lot of people who get clinical practice and need mentorship. So I would suggest for some, one of the worries was about who's going to do that mentorship. I think that the collaboration that you've done with this actually says the commission is really interested in being connected to other agencies in early childhood education. And certainly the mentor program does provide that alternative that no other early childhood level has. So I think we need to look at how we connect up with that. But mentorship matters. Every student teacher needs to be supervised in their clinical field experience. And at the community college level, that is almost exclusively the professor that teaches the course. In other levels, there's other professionals that do that work. But no matter what, they do need that connection. So we'll have to try to figure out how to do that. And I think to better put mentorship and articulate it at the leadership in early childhood educators and at both levels of the administration. Because some schools will have one, some will have the other. Finally, I think in terms of the administrators, I think there's a big gap between 1 and 2. And I would just like to hear, not today, but in general, what's the articulation for why it's so much different when you're administering one site than when you're administering multiple sites. And I think that could be articulated because it certainly is shown here. So finally, the idea would be, does that ECE Administrator 1, are there other alternatives such as there are for Administrator 2? If we've heard a voice that says, no, don't do that. But I'd just like to bring that idea back. Okay, I need to stop now. Everybody else needs to bring in their ideas too.
Any other commissioners?
I did have a quick question for staff, maybe just to explain the difference between ECE 1 and that of an associate teacher. How are those two different? How they differ? I'm not quite. I have questions. I may have another question after that, but can you clarify that, please?
Yeah, so the associate teacher level under our current permit matrix is at 12 units along with experience. And under California Title V regulations, they can serve both as a supportive role and also as a teacher of record. So with our new permit matrix under the authorizations, the E1 would provide a supportive role. They would be able to supervise in the classroom. They would be able to be counted in the ratio. They would be able to fill in when needed, but they would not necessarily be determined as the daily teacher of record. There would be some sort of a lead teacher or a head teacher or some teacher that would be in that classroom supporting that work.
I guess my follow-up to that then is there a need for more of a separation between associate teacher and EC1? And maybe extending the required units for EC1 just to make that clear.
Required units would be, so under the current permit matrix, and a person could enter with 6 units in that associate teacher role. And as they are working towards, they can also get renewals up to 10 years with AB 1930 did address that concern. So currently they can continue as of April 1st. There'll be additional codes that will come out regarding that, but they can continue in that spot. But again, Title V has allowed them to fulfill the teacher of record. So with the EC1, the whole concept of the work group was to provide a specific role that is a supportive role. And so with the addition or with the entrance at that 12 units, of course, somebody can enter at 6 units and then they can that would be good for 2 years while they get their additional 6 units, but it caps at the 12 units. And so they can continue to be in that supportive role, as Renee mentioned, for the duration of their career. So the work group really felt like there needed to be a delineated role for anyone in that supportive capacity.
Executive Director Sandy.
I just want to amplify this a little. I suspect this feels a little like 3-dimensional chess. Yeah. In the room. Yeah, it does to me, and I know how to play this game. But I say it's complex. Credentialing is complex, and this in particular, I totally get it. I loved your entree to this, Renee, about it being both a lattice, allowing lots of different on-ramps, and a ladder, allowing folks to stepwise up and into and across the different ways in which you might serve in an early childhood setting. And an early childhood setting right now is birth through age 8, typically, right? So we've done a lot of work in this way. So in this space in the last few years, I think a key and core difference here, and I don't know that it's really a difference. I think it's more nuanced. The master plan for early learning and care called for strengthening the preparation of the early learning workforce. We called for it, suggesting, I think recommending that we aim at about an AA degree level of preparation for someone who would be in the journey level teacher of record role. And if you look at some of the national research on this, there's a strong argument for going to a baccalaureate degree as in early childhood and child development with a course of pedagogy that goes with it that is early learning pedagogy, which suggests that the outcomes for children, if you have a stable workforce prepared at that level, the outcomes are significant and substantial. So there's been a very strong push for decades, for as long as I've been working around this, toward we need to get to a stronger preparation base for our earliest learners. The economy in California has not been ready to accept baccalaureate level expectation of preparation for preschool. Just the affordability of getting to that level of preparation or providing a wage structure for people serving in this space is just that we haven't gotten there yet. But moving to the AA level is what this work group has been trying to do. And what the AA level for an ECE2 would replace is you're almost at the AA level under the current permit structure. Under this permit structure, start at almost there as a provisional certification, but make it all the way to the AA. So we get into some alignment with what our master plan for early learning care would be. So that's for the journey level teacher. At the assistant level, we've had an ongoing debate for decades of work here around whether someone who has 3 courses in early childhood education or child development is sufficiently prepared to teach day in and day out other people's children in state preschool. In the early days when I first got here, that was the emergency permit form of the child development permit. And recognizing that so many people were coming in that route, what we did the last time we reformed this and created the child development permit we know is we said, okay, you can come in as a teacher of record with 12 units and you have 2 renewal cycles to make it to 24. So for 35 years in this agency, we have really had a focus on let's get to at that level of preparation in order for this workforce to be where we'd like them to be for our children, recognizing all of these economies. That's the old permit that would, or the current permit that would be replaced if you adopted this permit structure. And what this permit structure would do with that 12-unit space is continue to honor it as an entry-level space to work in a supportive role in early learning and care settings, meeting some of these technical expectations that Mava raised at the table and you confirmed would be taken care of, and I can't remember what they are, so, but that's okay. But not serving as a permanent day in and day out teacher of record, but providing a pathway for a person with 12 units to do that, or a pathway for them to not have to renew and make the next level into renewal cycles. They'd be able to stay at that level if that's where they want to be. So that's really what the proposal here and the difference is between these 2 permits. And I know, Debbie, you mentioned the AB 1930 bill that came through late last year that allows, in fact, we brought regulations to you at a prior meeting that allows somebody who has the current 12-unit level of the child development permit, not the new one, but this one that exists right now, to stay at that level and continue to serve as a teacher of record. So early on, Braun, when you mentioned in your presentation that anyone who holds that permit and is subject to this new permissive right to not have to ever have more than 12 units could stay in a teacher of record role for the life of their career. They don't have to transition to the new permit. But I think, and so I'm sorry, have I complicated the 3-dimensional chess portion of this? That's really, we should have done this before lunch, guys, but it's okay. It's okay. Stick with me for a minute. I think the question is, do we want to recognize these 3 buckets of teaching, assisting, teaching, mentoring, with these kind of educational or equivalent levels, differentiating them? And that's what's being proposed to you now. That's what the field responded to. And that's what the master plan, it aligns with what our master plan has been. And yet the authority to say yes, no, or modify further, or, explore any particular issue within this further, that decision is up to you as a body. You have the authority in statute to set the requirements for this permit, and that's where we are. I hope that was helpful. I just tossing that out for giving you some thought time, David. Commissioner.
Any other commissioners?
I feel like my mind was so focused about TPAs this morning that flipping is hard. I look at the number of directors that responded. I find that heartening. But then I think, what does it mean by director? If you Google how much directors and preschool directors make in California, it's $62,000. If that is the director that responded, I doubt that they are the people with fiscal authority in a school district to determine whether they're going to continue doing preschool or not. Has anybody looked at, going back to the economy that you brought up, has anybody looked at the economic feasibility of these changes? And thinking also back to the TPA discussion that issue, and you see, and AICCU brought up about the idea of are we putting programs in an impossible situation so that they will take their preschool funding and put it in PK instead of into 3.
I'm wondering if Stephen Proctor might be more appropriate to respond to this. I don't know if that's allowable, but I know within what he was saying, it might. Could it come up?
We've been partnering very closely with the Department of Education in this. So, yeah, good.
Yeah, of course, happy to rejoin. I'm sorry, I'd like to, I can rehear the question.
That is like district CBOs or have they looked at these recommendations and determined whether or not programs will be able to continue with these changes based upon their current funding?
Yeah, so we're incredibly mindful of that. I personally am an accountant by training, who happen to fall in love with early childhood. I think the important clarification that's been made here, what AB needs to do, the current the current state of staffing in our programs. We know so many of our programs rely on the associate teacher permit, so being able to renew that really creates a bridge. And while we have this parallel kind of rate quality, this reform to subsidized reimbursement or reimbursement for subsidized programs, considers things like a lot of probably reminding of all things, but including things like education and qualification, specialization, things like that. We are hopeful that the intent to fund at the cost of care will sufficiently bridge, help us kind of get to that the fiscal needs. Rates are too low to cover sufficiently wages for what it costs to. We fully recognize the social services and the administration with the bargaining table with the Providers United Union around those pieces. So we are fully plugged in and know that is compensation needs to increase, and that comes with reimbursement. So this gives us, I think, the events that have occurred, specifically 30, that help us with the bridge.
Commissioner Simmons, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah. What I'm really not clear on in this item is alternative pathways. Is there will there be a bigger opportunity for the commission to weigh in on alternative pathways?
Absolutely.
It's an additional agenda.
It's going to be under section 4 that's talking about future agenda items, opportunities for further development. If you look specifically at section 4, item 2, it will be a deeper investigation there.
I'm on section 4.
And that's where we're going to be looking at other possible pathways, including apprenticeships, dual enrollment, micro-credentialing, integration of models such as Montessori. So that is a next step agenda.
Can I also expand a little bit on that? So I think the question you're asking about alternatives and some of the things that occur later in the item are areas that are not necessarily yet fully developed. This being 3-dimensional chess, I don't know what 4th-dimensional chess would look like, but at this point, I think the permit structure with these 5 levels would represent the core base. And once that stops moving and we've got it, you can start thinking about what are some appropriate lattice steps into it, alternatives. We've been talking for some time about micro-credentialing. for instance, as a way for people to demonstrate competence rather than to have to take Carnegie units. I think we are right on the edge of that becoming a bigger part of some of what we do in Credentially. The opportunity is there. We just haven't fully developed that idea yet, but it could become a really important part of how we lattice people in. Similarly with different areas of specialization, we didn't talk about birth to two really in this permit structure. And it's a critical part of what somebody with this permit may be directed to do. So we need to get back to what is that? There are other parts that have to be fully developed. I'm going to say this, and I hope the staff doesn't quail when I do. This is, well, year however many, we've still got 3 to 5 years to get this thing fully built out, right? And we have time as we do. I mean, when you're in agreement that we can move forward with this core base in Title V regulations, then we start the process of writing this up as a regulation and then continue the conversation before we finalize that whole reg package that talks about areas of specialization. What does it take to get them? What are the options for getting them? We've got a lot to build out in this credential area. That's all I'm saying. So there's time to do that. And the questions and direction you provide us at this table will direct those next steps, as will the context and environment in which we're doing this work, and our stakeholder community will be part of that.
I'm ready to move the item.
Is it because you're hungry?
Based upon the fiscal information was extremely helpful. And the discussion of regulations, I would be more than happy to move the item.
I think Chair.
I will second it just to continue the discussion. Mr. Profiter, could you come back up here for a second?
Getting your steps in today.
So, Mary, what you just said was helpful. And what you said a few minutes ago in terms of the context was really helpful. And when I looked at what the motion would be, Dave, the motion is that we reviewed the information, which we did, and if appropriate, approve proposed changes. The proposed changes are coming through our stakeholders' input. And I want to be respectful because this is not my area of expertise. What I heard Mr. Profiter say, I think, was that this work is helpful to what you all are doing in the department. And if we have 3 to 5 years to build this out, perhaps we may be in a more fiscally sound place so that we can begin to address the wage inequity for our early learners. Does that sort of make sense?
Yes, yeah, and that's certainly our desire, and that's what our superintendent would like. We want to make sure that our staff are fairly compensated at a level that attracts new folks to the field. Right, that's a huge part of it. So, yes.
Okay then.
Commissioner Brown.
I also want, I'm looking at Commissioner Cotton. I just wish you were here with us, because one of the things that I'm seeing here that I think is very promising is the work that the Commission and the Department of Education, the overlap that we've always had, and now we're really working it. Because the other thing is, this is the one area of education where we're talking about incredible diversity of delivery of programs, not all of which are publicly funded. And otherwise, we mostly talk about public schools. When there's a lot of other alternatives and a lot of other privates, that's not our bailiwick. This one, we've always done something that I think is bigger and deeper, but it's also more realistic. If you ask anyone who has someone, particularly someone who is 5 or under, there's alternatives that have to be looked at. And I think that the permit was the one place that was really, you built that back in the 90s, that other agencies could begin to use even if they didn't have to. And this part here is also bridging to a public system that says you need a credential to teach children. You can't just go in and teach public school 4th grade and have 5 units of college. You don't get to do that for a really good reason. And so what I think this does is move this up to be in and an equitable position.
Kate, I absolutely agree with you. Thank you for that. This is a great partnership. And I know how closely Stephen works with CTC. I don't know what it was like years before, but I feel like there's a lot of connections between the department and the commission in ways that really is growing our work. And I'm really and best supporting the field. So I'm really excited about it. But I do appreciate Stephen. I appreciate the CTC team in working through and really talking about this. Thank you.
It sounds like we have a vote on the table. I want to be clear. We have a first by Commissioner Simmons, and a second by Chair Shire. And the motion is to approve all staff recommendations as a whole. Is that correct? Okay, so since we have a motion, is there any further discussion? The recording secretary call for the vote.
Lynette Brown. Aye. Jose Cardenas.
Aye.
Carl Carlton.
Aye.
Christopher Davis.
Aye.
Peter Shire.
Aye.
Bonnie Clark.
Aye.
Ira Lit.
Aye.
Ruben Mejias.
Aye.
David Simmons.
Aye.
Use off.
Aye.
Carries.
Well, we just want to say thank you very much, Ms. Marshall, Ms. Keeler, and Ms. Kennedy. Thank you for this work group, for all the work that you've done. We look forward to hearing a little bit more in the future. So thank you. All right, so we're on to item 4C. Next, we have item 4C, the potential adoption of proposed revised program standards and new performance expectations for speech language pathology services credential programs. This item is being presented by William Hattrick. This is an information action item. Mr. Hattrick, will you please begin?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. I am pleased to bring you agenda item 4C for the potential adoption of revised program standards and performance expectations for the preliminary speech language pathology services credential. Currently, the commission grants preliminary SLP credentials to candidates who hold or have been recommended for a master's degree or higher in SLP that is accredited by the American Speech Language Hearing Association's Council on Academic Accreditation, or CAA. Candidates must also complete a specialized program of professional preparation in speech language pathology based on commission-approved standards as outlined in the California Code of Regulations 80048.9. Recently, the Council on Academic Accreditation updated its own standards, which went into effect January 2023. In order to better align with the national accrediting requirements, the Commission convened an advisory panel to examine existing CTC standards and draft updated language that builds on the required standard language from the CAA. This also supports the Professional Services Division's goal of streamlining accreditation requirements for programs whenever possible, whether it's already approved programs or those interested in initial program review. While SLPs also obtain a license from the California Speech Language Pathology and Audiology and Hearing Aid Dispensers Board, the advisory panel felt that it was important for there to be California and public school specific content in the revised CTC program standards in order to obtain a credential to work in California public schools. Similar to the format of other recent program standards revisions, the panel identified the unique knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary for candidates to be successful entry-level professionals in California public schools. The 4 program standards explain the content that programs must provide to their candidates. Additionally, there are 9 performance expectations that candidates will need to be introduced to, practice, and assessed on prior to issuance of the credential. Supervised clinical practice will continue to be a requirement for issuance of the credential in the form of 100 hours of direct service with students and their families. Additional hours are accrued by completing other tasks associated with the work of a school-based SLP during their practicum. A field survey was made available to the public in October to gather feedback and suggestions. Overall, the response was positive and led to subsequent conversations with the advisory panel, which made changes based on some of the feedback received, and the full results are available in Appendix C. Staff is recommending that programs transition to the new program standards and performance expectations during the 2025-26 academic year, with a transition plan due by March 2026. Since the new standards and performance expectations are separate concepts from those included in the national standards, there will no longer be the need for a crosswalk document. To be an approved program sponsor, preliminary SLP programs must maintain their accreditation with ASHA and show alignment with the Commission's program standards through regular accreditation activities. Should you take action to adopt the new standards and performance expectations, staff will notify all program sponsors and implement the plan for transitioning. Thank you, and I'll take any questions you have. And I'm also joined by several members of our advisory panel as well, who are hopefully on with us virtually.
Yeah. We will now open for public comment. If there are members of the public that would like to make a comment, please notify the meeting moderator by submitting a request card or by clicking on the raise hand icon if participating through Zoom, or pressing *9 if participating by phone. Public comment is limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Recording secretary, are there any public comment? Public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Francois?
Thank you for this. I mean, content-wise, this is not my field of expertise, and so I depend on the advisory panel to have a close eye on it. I just have a question about the composition of the advisory panel. I noticed that the 2 LEA representatives are all higher ed faculty. Is that typical for this content area?
For this advisory panel, we put out a wide application, and that's who we had apply. They were all qualified to be on the panel. We'd always like more, but yeah, that was who applied to be on this panel. But I think the representatives we had really shared valuable input from those LEAs and worked closely, especially once we got feedback from the public on some of the recommended changes or edits to certain wording we had. But yes, we were happy to have 2 of the 11 be school-based SLPs. And the higher ed faculty also, some of them are also involved in the schools as well. So their primary is higher ed faculty, but they some of them are also still involved in public school work.
I imagine that they are all very highly qualified. I just think that when we make these, when we bring advisory panels together, we try very, very hard for diversity of perspective and roles and segments, et cetera, that we keep trying to recruit more people.
And thankfully, we also did have a high number of school-based SLPs in our survey responses. So that sort of gave the advisory panel the additional confidence, because the survey feedback was so positive that we were headed in the right direction, and making sure that the content will be useful and not redundant with what the national standards already require.
Any other commissioners?
Nice to see you, Mr. Hattrick, at the table. I'm wondering if, because these are national standards, that there's some comfort level what it is we're doing. Do you have any sense about that?
I know that this has been a discussion, and because they revised their standards, we definitely wanted to, like I mentioned, streamline what we're doing and make it authentic for our SLP programs, for them to train their candidates to be entry-level professionals in the California public schools. We went from 16 standards down to 4, and they are unique. Some of them build on what's in the national standards, but the panel did feel like, obviously, if you took a look at the national standards, they are comprehensive, but the panel felt like there still needed to be some California and public school specific content in there. And that's where we landed with these 4 standards and 9 performance expectations.
Any other commissioners? Not seeing any other commissioners. I'm just add a quick piece. SLPs are definitely needed. It's something in our district is everyone's looking for an SLP right now. And being a benefactor, my child had a fantastic SLP going through their educational career. And just changed the trajectory of them being involved and motivated in school. So just the need for SLPs is huge, and to see that we're aligning ourselves to national standards and then making them also California based, I think it's something that probably overdue and needed, right? As far as to update those standards. But with that said, it is an information action item, and staff recommends that the commission adopt the revised program standards, performance expectations for the SLP services credential. Do I have a motion to approve the revised speech language pathology program standards and performance expectations? Commissioner Davis, and then seconded by Chair Gunner Shire. Is there any further discussion? Will the recording secretary please call for the vote? Each member please respond with aye, nay, or abstain.
Brown. Aye. Dave Cardenas.
Aye.
Carol Cotton. Christopher Davis.
Aye.
Peter Grinnell Shire.
Aye.
Bonnie Clark.
Aye.
Ira Lit.
Aye.
Ruben Mencius.
Aye.
David Simmons.
Aye.
Don't use all.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hattrick. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you publicly to everyone who participated in the advisory panel. This is not my area of expertise either. So leaned on them heavily for the content of these new standards.
So just as a reminder, the commission voted this morning to table item 4D as staff continue to explore the most appropriate course of action. So lastly, we're on item 4E. We have item 4E, the flexibilities for the commission approved educator preparation programs due to the effects of the Southern California wildfires. Item is being presented by Aaron Sullivan. This is an information action item. Ms. Sullivan, will you please begin?
Be happy to, thank you. A successful day in the policy committee today, so hoping to continue doing that. So want to acknowledge the fact that the item that is currently published is a revised agenda item. So if anybody in the field has had this open for a couple of days, please click refresh for the most current version of the item that you have. And then I want to explain the reason for the revision. So when the wildfires broke out, there was some pretty quick response from folks in the building. Unfortunately, we had some experience with this sort of a thing when we went through COVID. Probably there's been a lot of other opportunities, but COVID was the one that really trained us up in the emergency response. And so a lot of folks were able to quickly step in. Now, that said, the original item was written by me based on the flexibilities that the commission provided during COVID. I felt like, okay, this is great. It's easy. We know what the commission was willing to do then. These things still make sense. Since COVID, however, a number of our program standards have been integrated into California Code of Regulations Title V by reference. That includes ed specialists, people personnel services. That means that because they are in regulations, the commission does not have the authority to close them. So the item was revised to basically pull out, because as we say in the item, commission can't offer any flexibilities or override things that are in statute or regulations, because that's law. So you have my apologies. The public has my apologies for sort of a bait and switch. I hope nobody feels that way. The things that were pulled back because the commission no longer has the authority, obviously, to flex those things. So what we have in front of us right now are the things that you can flex. That is flexibilities around the hours of clinical practice for multiple and single subject permits, some flexibilities around the required visits from their mentors and their solo teaching, all of these things for your consideration and discussion. I'm happy to answer questions about those. And then, of course, flexibilities for the administrator and teacher induction programs. Those can still be available to you. The staff is, I just want to assure that I'm thinking about commissioners and the public at the same time. I want to assure everyone that staff has not let go of the opportunity for the additional flexibilities. We have great working relationships, thank goodness, with friends in the legislature and the administration. So we're going to continue to pursue, can we offer some of the flexibilities that you offered folks during COVID? The final sort of staff recommendation in this item is that you basically authorize staff to keep doing that work and seek out flexibilities as needed. So those are the recommendations. That is why the item is modified. In addition to pointing all of that out, I would like to point out that we learned some things during COVID around the need to put some very strict kind of guidance around some of these things. So the fires in LA County, in the LA area in Southern California. I'm a Northern California girl, so once I get below Fresno, it's all LA to me. I realize that's absolutely not correct. But the fires in LA County, San Diego County, San Bernardino County, and Ventura County. We would like to, and you'll see in the item here, we're putting some strictures around how folks can be recommended. We would draft a letter of attestation, some kind of a memo of attestation that we would ask institutions to submit with those recommendations, saying, we've evaluated this candidate and we are providing these specific flexibilities because this candidate needed it. We really do want these things to be very strictly sort of maybe on a case-by-case basis. And we did get some support. I don't know if they're here to make public comment today, but we did get some supportive comments in emails from programs saying, thank you for kind of putting some of these restrictions, if you will, or I want to call them guidelines for programs for applying them. So I think we're in a good place. I will say that unlike COVID, and people have heard me say this already that work here with me, COVID happened to everyone all at once. We were all sent home, and within a couple of weeks, we figured out Zoom or Teams and got our laptops working, and we were kind of back to work. I realized teachers were trying to figure out how to teach remotely, and we were all trying to figure out how to do our jobs remotely, but it was everyone. This has been a little bit different. Well, it's a lot different in that it's not everyone, but it's also a little bit different because of the timing. Not all schools were even back yet. So when I reached out to some of our commissioners and some of our sector areas and some other folks that we have contact with, in some cases, the answer was, we don't know yet. We don't know what's going to happen at our CSU campuses. We don't know what's going to happen because school isn't back in yet. So the information coming from the field has been coming in much more slowly to us. So again, if there are people listening that have information for us about how things are going in the field, us trying to get that information has actually been quite a bit harder. We're here, we're open, and we know that people know how to find us, but they're either still in shock or we still don't know yet what performance assessment is going to look like at the end of this semester, or what student teaching is going to look like at the end of this semester. So I do want to appreciate the commissioners that worked with me, that responded to my request for information, and the other people in the field. And then just ask the commission to consider these recommendations, the staff recommendations, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just thank you for reaching out. I know the outpouring of love that came from the commission came right away. Y'all know my campus is in Pasadena. I grew up there. That's home for me. I went through public school there. To know that 10,000 students were displaced and 1,400 teachers and staff members were displaced. And I don't know if Carolyn's still on the call, but Superintendent Thurman, their office has been really instrumental in working with the local district down there. So all the flexibilities will matter. because it's happening to students and teachers simultaneously. So like you said, COVID all happened to us. Well, I can't teach because my laptop got melted or burned down in the fire. So I can't do remote learning. So these are definitely some things that are quite different, but I can tell you that support has just been really amazing from all the folks. I mean, the governor's office has been down. They've been there a lot. We've got open access to folks to make sure that there's hold harmless and things that are happening within the realm. So the flexibilities will happen. We do have students who are impacted. I know personally that have called us, but they were worried about getting their program done. So these flexibilities will matter to not only me, but my colleagues in that region that know what happens when, you know, the school's not opening. You know, 5 schools are gone. So you're co-locating kids, and that makes a whole different. So definitely it kind of cuts close when you see it. You know, we've been on the phone with Lahaina, and we've been on the phone with Paradise, California, and they've never seen anything like this. This is kind of an urban fire. 10,000 structures are gone. I mean, this is totally different. They're just starting the removal process just this week. So they're starting to get all the debris out, you know. So it's a long haul, but these things do matter. And like I said, as things come, I will definitely stay in contact. So thanks.
At this point, we will like to open up for public comment. There's members of the public that would like to make a comment. Please notify the meeting moderator by submitting a request card or by clicking on the raise hand icon, or participating through Zoom or pressing *9, participating by phone. The public comment is limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
Gephardt?
Good afternoon. Thank you. I couldn't hear all of the comments regarding if there were any changes to the initial recommendations. However, due to the tremendous devastation we experienced in Southern California, AXA appreciates the Commission's prompt response to provide program flexibilities to the extent that they can for the counties of Los Angeles, Ventura, San Bernardino, and San Diego. We encourage the Commission to continue outreach to the field in the event additional flexibilities are warranted and to ensure that the affected candidates can continue their credentialing pathways without disruption. Thank you.
Additional public comment. The public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Litt.
Thank you. First, just want to offer some additional thoughts, care, and sympathy for families, for children, for communities, and for educators who've been so deeply affected by these devastating disasters. All of our, thoughts and good wishes are shared. Also, excuse me, want to thank staff for being responsive in a timely manner to really unusual and very challenging circumstances. And I suspect, I'll speak for myself, but I expect most of my colleagues would agree that we want to provide appropriate flexibilities as warranted under the circumstances. That said, I guess maybe my key question, I might have a follow-up or two. My key question is, how problematic do you think it would be if we left you with the approval alone of the last item on the agenda, which is to authorize staff to continue working actively in this space and to come back and review and approve some polished recommendations that take into account further considerations both from the field and what might be available to us at our April meeting? And that's really an open question. I don't know what that would mean to folks in the field who, of course, I'm sure are anxious at the moment about what the future might hold, but I also have some concerns that the array of options available to us at the moment are awfully broad and varied, and maybe we haven't had the time yet to fully flesh out what would be ideal under these really unusual circumstances.
Could I just,
Please, yeah.
Charlotte, are you suggesting that because of, I'm looking at this and it says the commission could choose to, is that what is?
I think there's a could, and then there's a wide range of things and sort of a combination of different sets of combinations, but not all of the possible sets of combinations. You also raised, I think, thoughtfully, what are the closest parallels to the kind of authorizations we provided during the COVID pandemic? But I would need to be re-educated about all of those, and I don't think I see them all fully reflected here just yet. So it feels as though we might be able to get to an even better ideal set of solutions and possibilities. But I am aware that the clock is ticking for programs and constituents and future educators that want support. And so I think that's where it's an open question. I'm actually not being suggestive. I'm asking the question, what would that look like? We took more time and then provided you with some direction at the next meeting.
Right.
Can I follow up and just? I think I hear what you're saying. I'm struggling with what our colleagues are feeling right now and what they're having to do now for the candidates. And I don't know if we've ever done this, but could we say, do what you think is best right now and then provide that information to ed prep programs so that they can begin to do what they need to do and then come back in April? I'm really struggling with this.
I think the problem is the things that are not here can't come to you. So because the commission doesn't have the authority to flex those things because they're in regulations. Is that what
I
you're
understand?
saying?
Yeah. Essentially, I'm going to jump in here. So I think just on a first top level, there's kind of a binary thumbs up, thumbs down. We want to provide flexibility. So that would be a really helpful signal to the field because they're eager and afraid at the moment. And I'm seeing nods around the table, so that's not quite a poll, but I think you want to provide some flexibilities. And as Erin has pointed out, these are the things that you can change right here in this moment. And the things that you can't change are either locked in regulation or locked in statute and would require an executive order, which was used pretty effectively, I would say, under COVID, or some other legislative action. And that involves us, I think, doing two things, really. First of all, understanding better what are the conditions and the pressure points that are being experienced in the field. And that, I think, is still being tallied for us. And as we learn about that, we can work with the administration and the legislature about things that would be tailored to a specific response. And I know there are many other areas in which executive orders and actions like this are being contemplated, because it's a full service set of problems in Southern California right now. So I think what would be helpful is to get the signal. And one way to signal that would be to say, yes, provide these on an as needed basis. Yes, continue to work with the administration and the legislature. You might also, something that we would do anyway, but I would just say that we aren't going to take unilateral action on your behalf without talking with the chair and vice chair. That we wouldn't do that. So any ideas that are coming forward, maybe you want to authorize the chair and vice chair to work directly with staff to see kind of in the moment what can be done, and we'll come back in April. So I guess what I'm suggesting is it's possible for you to say yes to all of those things or no to those things or more things.
Commissioner Padre.
Everything Mary said. So what we're hearing really is the clinical practice hours. I think that's the biggest. Even just this week, I was talking to an intern's, just meeting her kids in a park because there's no school. And she's doing only social emotional kinds of support. So clearly it's not going to have the hours that this person needs, and many cases like this. So I would love if we could endorse what we have here, so the programs have some sense of assurance, everyone's not panicking, and then of course on a as needed basis make additional allowances. I did also simultaneously have a question. So you said that we have control over the 600 hours for multiple and single subject. Are there our requirements for all of the other programs?
But because we I want to be clear so everybody can hear. Yes, there are clinical practice hours that are required for the other programs. But when we updated regulations, when we updated standards, we incorporated our standards by reference. So now everything that's in the standards is in regulations, and that includes the clinical practice hours.
So the message to the field, if we vote to approve this, is that we are allowing for accommodations in the 600 hours for multiple and single only, making attempts with the legislature. So no assurances on the other programs.
I think you can say yet.
Yet. Not right now.
We would love to push it.
Yes.
We need the legal foundation to do it.
Commissioner Litt?
Yes, I agree with the sentiment which everybody's sharing, I guess the pragmatics. What I see here is a list of a range of options, not an option to endorse, that would require some kind of either negotiation or, practical nuancing. And I'm not sure we have all the information necessary to do that just at the moment. Again, this is a little bit more suggestive, but would it be sufficient, do we think, to meet the needs, the urgent needs of the field, if we did something such as, made a recommendation that noted that the commission is eager to provide appropriate allowable flexibilities under these emergency conditions, including with respect to, and we could list those things with respect to clinical practice hours, number of formal observations, independent student teaching. That signals to the field that we will offer some form of relief on each of those things without having to be specific. I worry if we say today we reduce the number of clinical practice hours to 500, we may find that that's not doable, right, for some of our stakeholders. And so I'm a little worried about being too concrete and specific, but we could give some general guidance that we will find ways to get relief on these core things where we have authority, and then further to authorize staff to work with the legislature and the executive branch to for things that they have the authority, we do not. I mean, again, I don't know if that's sufficient because there's a time lag. We've got 2 months before we meet again. So I kind of look to staff to see if that feels like, based on what you're hearing, and maybe to my co-commissioners who have their ears to the ground in different places, whether that would be sufficient to signal to the community that they're on pace.
Commissioner Simmons?
My question really is for the ex officios. If we were to give that flexibility in 2 months, is that too close to when the programs are ending, which is May? So
That's not what I'm hearing him propose. I think what Commissioner Litt is saying is don't be concrete in the recommendations. Let the programs know that they will be receiving flexibilities in student teaching, in clinical hours, in supervision, without putting more operational definitions for what those flexibilities are. But I agree, April is way too late to let them know what's happening. In terms of, we're probably not going there. We're not going to be specific, but we're leaving it to you to let them know.
Well, and I will say, so during COVID, again, these were the recommendations that were provided to you during COVID. You did not choose during COVID option A for clinical. The commission did not choose to set a specific number of hours of clinical practice and say, okay, everybody, they can't do 6, but they have to do at least 5. You didn't. You went with option B at the time. But I didn't want to limit, as a staff member, I didn't want to limit your options. So I just, it's a new day, it's a different situation. So I brought you the same options we brought to you. But I can tell you, if it helps guide your decision-making at all, you went with B, and B, if you choose B, you can still choose C. That's why there's an and or, and I apologize if that's not clear. So if you don't choose A, and decide to have a conversation and decide what's a minimum number of clinical practice we think they should absolutely have. you could still choose B. And then C can always be on the table because we're talking about if they pass a teaching performance assessment, can the program then evaluate? That's a little bit like the secondary passing standard for TPA where, you know, an institution can say, okay, they've passed. Can we look at some of their other performance measures and say, we think that this candidate probably is good where they are right now to recommend. So that's the difference between those three.
And what, just adding to, is that okay? I don't mean to jump in front of commissioners. I think it would help us to not do A, but to do B. I don't think that we are the best equipped to say, sure, you know, of the 600 hours, you could only get 25 of them, that'll do. Or where's the number? But the program has the, you know, and especially if there is signed attestation from the program saying we have determined that X, Y, Z, that would be good direction from you for us, so that we are working in partnership and case by case sort of basis. The circumstances are not going to be all the same here.
It could also really set a structure for what we seek in an executive order. If that's the way we go. Because for ed specialist, for instance, it is also 600 hours. It is also the same number of observations. It is also solo student teaching. So by adopting something here, it sets a structure for us to then be able to say to the governor, let the commission, if that's the direction we go, I'm sorry, I don't mean to take the governor's name in vain. But that provides us with something we can say the commissioners have already endorsed this set of options by adopting them for multiple single.
So B, D, and B, let's see, D and E all include this notion, and F all include some notion of deferring to the local program to inform us about adequacy and need. And
Commissioner Clack and then Commissioner Lick.
My question's a little more general, so if we're still working out the details of this, I'll wait.
Mine is just a quick follow-up. So, I mean, a different way to read this, which is helpful with your guidance, is it that B, D, and E is as close as we can get to what we offered in terms of flexibilities during COVID, which I think is a really helpful precedent. So we're sort of building in lines of work that we're comfortable with. And I'll speak for myself and say I feel confident about the choices we made under those difficult circumstances. So if that's the case, that I think is a level of unspecific but helpful guidance that I would be comfortable offering.
It's really helpful. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like Commissioner Litt's trying to make an motion.
My comment's a little bit separate, so feel free.
Great. If it helps to move us forward, then I would like to propose that we move forward around B, D, E, and F as written here in this staff.
Did you include C?
There's a motion on the table. Includes items B, D, E, and F. And I think staff had also asked about authorized to seek additional flexibilities as needed. And if you want,
that's in.
It just doesn't have.
Just follows up.
It doesn't have
letter in front of it.
Did you intend to include that in your motion?
Yes, for sure. So I was reading that as part of F, and then F.1.
Is there a second?
I'll second, but we want to include there, and I think I heard you say you're going to do this anyway, but that the staff would work with the governor's office on any necessary executive orders. Want to include that in a motion?
That's F1, F.1.
Yeah, F point, I would, so if you'll permit me, I think you could leave it at working with the legislature and the administration pretty much. I wouldn't want to be presumptuous about what assistance they might be able to provide. So that could include an EO or some other vehicle we haven't anticipated yet. So
then we have a motion.
That's a second motion.
We have a first and a second. And then further discussion, Commissioner Clack.
I fully support the motion. I guess I have a comment as we're working with agencies and trying to develop this. I'm just recalling that former vice chair
was working at a school hugely impacted by the Paradise Fires. One of the very few meetings I've ever missed as a commissioner was because I had to do a pretty scary evacuation because of a wildfire. My guess is most people sitting at this table have a pretty scary wildfire story or know someone impacted. I'm guessing this won't sadly be the last time we're talking about schools and children and teachers and candidates impacted by fires or other climate issues. So I'm just wondering if, as we're doing this, there's a way to create, you know what I'm thinking, especially for like maybe a small rural district that might not rise to the level of the attention of what, you know, it might not have the size impact, but for the people at that district, it's devastating, right? And so if we can create maybe sort of a policy or a process that, pardon? Yes, a standard protocol that would allow staff to have these flexibilities for any agency that came forward and said, we were impacted by this issue. Can we get these flexibilities that have been granted in other emergencies? So that's, I guess, fine.
Thank you for that. And I think you read the mind of everybody. We don't know what shape that might take, but I think that was one of the first things that we talked about was, oh, here we are again, talking about this and having to wait for meetings and bring things. It would be nice if we had something a little more in place, some kind of structure in place that in the case of an emergency declaration or something, you know, very specific, there are letters that can get pulled right away. And I think we're going to investigate that. I don't know what that would look like. That is us requesting a certain level of authority to make those kinds of decisions in a moment. I don't know that it's impossible, but it's not an ask that I've made before. So I think we're very much trying to just chew on that. And again, really lucky to have great support and thought partners in the legislature and the administration. So I'll be curious to hear what we can accomplish for you, and that would come back to you at some point for sure.
Appreciate that.
Is there any other further discussion?
Do we need to move on Bonnie's motion?
Mine was just more.
Yes. I'm wondering whether we should make that a motion.
It could be a direction to the staff that we're asking the staff. Yeah.
Then we have a motion on the table and we have some direction to staff, correct? So everybody okay to take a vote? All right, will the recording secretary call for the vote? Each member, please respond with aye, nay, or abstain.
Jeanette Brown. Aye. Jay Cardenas.
Aye.
Darrell Cotton. Christopher Davis.
Aye.
Peter Grinnell Shire.
Aye.
Bonnie Clark.
Aye.
Ira Lee.
Aye.
Ruben Mencius.
Aye.
David Simmons. Huang Yuzoff.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sullivan. Thank you for your attention to this. This is needed for our families and our students and over in Southern California, and like Bonnie had mentioned, in other places as well. So we want to make sure that we pay attention to this because we need to definitely address this concern head on and not wait. So thank you again. Having no additional items, I adjourn the Educator Preparation Committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Cardenas. I will now reconvene the general session and move to item 1H, new business. The bi-monthly agenda is presented for information. So the agenda is audience presentations. Please notify the meeting moderator by submitting a request card or clicking on the raise hand icon if it's paid through Zoom or pressing *9 if participating by phone. Recording secretary, are there any audience presentations?
So again, I actually just have questions. I know that AB passed. However, I've been getting so many from our staff about, their, especially those who permits, her associate teacher permits have expired. They're wondering, well, what does that mean for me now with AB 1930? Like, what's going on? Can you give us an update? And so my question is, how soon will the field receive any updates on implementation? Will there be a management bulletin sent out through CDE? We just, want to hear some updates, or if you guys are currently working on the implementation process, we'd be really happy to collaborate if there's possibility. Second thing, I wanted to ask a question or make a plea. Back in October 4th meeting, I received a roadmap to education for years. I was looking at it again, and one of the things that our focus group of educators said, man, they look at us like we're the step cousins. And so it would really be great if we could consider integrating the ECE workforce and the initiative on this roadmap and education initiative. And these are the words that was shared with me with our focus group teachers. We are not glorified babysitters. We are educators, and we need to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can address the first part. Is that? Yes, thank you.
Sure. Good question. So the legislation is currently does require that the commission complete the regulatory process to add these provisions into regulations by April 30th. So you all did approve our regulations packet, and it is on its way over to the Office of Administrative Law. And we do anticipate that it will be approved by then. Of course, OAL has their own timeline, but we are working very closely with them. We are also working on guidance materials. However, because we have to wait for the regulations to become effective, we don't have anything prepared to release to the field right now, but it is in the works as we speak. I just read a draft today. So we will have those posted just as soon as we get word that the regulations are under review and very close to being passed and approved.
I just extend this a little bit. I heard part of the question was for people who currently hold Child Development Associate permit who may have had that expire while 1930 is in progress. And well, that child development permit, the current child development permit exists now and will continue to exist until we're through with this whole regulatory process. So it's not going away anytime soon. But can you just clarify if someone's associate permit has expired? Is it game over for them, or is there an opportunity?
Absolutely not. As soon as those regulations are effective, they'll be able to renew. So there's no penalty for allowing that permit to expire or being in a situation where the permit has expired. As well, they can apply for an extension by appeal for that permit because they were unable to complete those renewal requirements. They are good to go. There's no penalty for that individual.
Thank you, Ms. School. In regards to the second part of your comments, I've asked Director Sandy just to.
Well, I'm gonna boomerang this around to Ms. Scooble. The second part was about the early childhood workforce and our roadmap. So
the Roadmap to Teaching project is an ongoing project, and we are continuously adding credentialing areas and areas of focus to that project. So our last iteration included the special education credential, and we are working on adding the early childhood, including the PK and the child development permits and or the early childhood education permits, just depending on what the timing is for that. But that is definitely in the works and part of that project. Eventually, the goal is to have every single credential pathway, including services credentials included in that, because those are all part of the education workforce continuum.
So Madam Chair, just to close that off, because this was all kind of a continuation of an item that was already agendized, you exercised latitude to provide responses. We typically don't during audience presentations if an item has not been on the agenda. So just FYI.
Thank you for the questions and thank you for the responses there. Any other audience presentations? All right, then I will now recess the general session. Members of the commission will go into closed session. The general session will reconvene at 8:30 tomorrow morning after roll call. Colleagues. gonna go into closed session, but take a break.
Okay, so just say we're gonna take a 10-minute.
How about a 10-minute break? So can you be back at 10 to 4?
I don't know.
Will you be back? Not can you, will you be back? Be back.
Feedback.
Be back.
You know?
Imperative.